Hey guys, so we're about to go over my assessment for my unit over the early River Valley civilizations. The first thing I'm going to go over is my assessment list. For week one, as I've mentioned before, I plan on this being like a 2 or 3 day class, so we would only be in here a couple of days out of the week, and so I have it modified for a 3-day version for each week right now. We will use exit slips and we will have a quiz. And also in week one, students will be getting their project groups and they will be able to turn in a project plan and an outline on how they're going to present their projects. In exit slips, we're going to go over the characteristics and they're going to list them, and then they can write their preference for which River Valley civilization they would like to do. And then another exit slip, we're going to brainstorm sources of information for their project and how you plan on presenting. For week two, we're going to have an exit slip that's going to have a map of Mesopotamia, and they're going to be asked to fill in locations as well as the Fertile Crescent. And then we're going to have a graphic organizer to fill in over the society, which I actually have that created for one of my assessments that we'll go over later. And then we're going to have a quiz over Mesopotamia. Week three, same thing. We're going to fill in a map over Egypt, including locations and physical characteristics. We're going to have an exit slip about one similarity and one difference between Mesopotamia and Egypt to answer one of our standards. And then we're going to have a quiz over Egypt. Week four, we're going to fill in a map over the Indus River Valley. We're going to have an exit slip, which is going to be a graphic organizer over the characteristics of the Indus River Valley. Then we're going to have a quiz over it. Week five, we're going to have another map over ancient China, and students are going to have to place the Great Wall on the map. And then we're going to have another exit slip where we list a similarity and difference between any 3 River Valley civilizations. And then we'll have our quiz. One of my standards is for students to be able to list similarities and differences between each of the River Valley civilizations. So that exit slip is going to help me gauge their learning. And then lastly, for week 6, we're going to play our Jeopardy game, which is my game for my unit. It's going to be a review. Students will be in teams of 3 or 4. And the team that has the most points at the end will win 3 bonus points. And then the other 2 days, we're going to have our performance task presentations. Students are going to be asked to provide a list of group involvement, detailing who did what for the project, to make sure that each student has a part and one student's not doing all the work. And then also, students are going to grade each other's presentations while we're in class, just to kind of give some more presentation. Okay, the next thing, go to my formative assessment. This is my formative assessment over week 2. We're going to satisfy the standards of being able to determine similarities and differences. We're going to compare characteristics, contributions, and achievements over Mesopotamia in particular. And we're going to be able to integrate information. The objectives, students will be able to discuss the early river civilization of Mesopotamia and all of its characteristics. Students will be able to analyze the similarities and differences between the early river valley civilizations, specifically Mesopotamia. And students will be able to gather information from various sources for their unit project, and they'll be able to see how using a variety of formats to present knowledge is a learning aid. I did 2 types of assessment for one because I didn't know if just a quiz was going to suffice or if I could use my graphic organizer as a type of assessment since the project was for teacher made. So I put both on here just to be sure. For our first assessment, it's just a little quiz. It's 5 questions. What river is located in the Mesopotamia civilization? What is a Zagrats? We're going to match the word to the definition. Which one of the following was an invention pertaining to Mesopotamian society? And then we have a fill in a blank that it says the blank was usually pulled by domestic animals to grow more food. The assessment part 2, if I'm allowed to use it. Students are asked to fill out at least 2 points for each topic in the Mesopotamian graphic organizer. The headings are location, problem solutions, inventions and new ideas, economy, geographic features, and shelter. And there's up close of that. And now to my modified assessment, same standards and objectives as before. My modifications that I've used, same questions, students get less answer choices and a bigger font. That's 2 of them. On the match the word, I left the same amount of choices. I just increased the font. I feel like they mostly should be able to do it. If not, I can always make more. And then for the fill in the blank, I added 2 choices to give them a better idea. And then, if I'm allowed to do the graphic organizer, instead of having to fill in at least 2, the students only have to fill in 1 point for each topic, and the same topics are presented: the location, problem solutions, inventions, new ideas, economy, geographic features, and shelter. Okay, my summative assessment is over the whole unit. We have our standards, which are to analyze similarities and differences between the early river valley civilizations, to construct arguments about characteristics necessary for a civilization using multiple sources, and to compare characteristics, contributions, and achievements of early river civilizations for all 4 of them. How I have it set up is there's 10 questions per river valley civilization. So the first 10 are over China, and since this is a 6th grade lesson, their majority are multiple choice. Some have 4 answer choices, some have 2. Let's go through here so you can see. I'll call out a few of them, like who is the first emperor of China. And then we have some vocabulary words, like what was the Jin, and was Confucius an emperor? What was the dragon backbone machine? What kind of wine was often used in the ancient ceremonies and rituals of China? And then what were known as the 3 perfections in ancient China? So forth. Starting with question 11, we move into ancient Egypt, and the same thing applies. They're mostly multiple choice. What river is found in Egypt that is also the longest river in the world? Who is the chief god in Egyptian religion? Where most of the pharaohs buried? The social structure of ancient Egypt represents what? Slaves were what? Schools in ancient Egypt were first established. And then after question 21, we go into the Indus River Valley. And there's just a few more questions like here. On number 25, you have blanks, but the answer choices are provided for you. And again, 28 has a blank. 29 is strictly fill in the blank. I've thought about using this as basically a bonus question, but I haven't made up my mind yet. I guess I'll just wait to see how many students miss it, and if that's something that we need to address further or not. Alright, and then question 31 through 40 are over Mesopotamia. And it's like the religious beliefs of the Mesopotamians were considered. A wood-shaped system of writing developed in Mesopotamia. What was a city-state? The region of Mesopotamia is located in the present-day country of. And that's my summative assessment. And then I have my performance task checklist. For my performance task, students are going to be assigned in groups. Say if there's 20 students in a class, there's going to be 5 students per group for each River Valley civilization. They are to conduct a short research project and answer a question, which the question will be to demonstrate their learning over the civilizations. They are to present claims and findings, sequencing ideas logically, and using descriptions, facts, and details. They also have to use appropriate eye contact, adequate volume, and clear pronunciation. And they have to integrate information presented in different media or formats. I've chosen to let the students come up with their own ways to make up their presentations to present their knowledge. It doesn't matter to me. They can do a PowerPoint, they can do a movie, they can do a commercial. I've thought about maybe even having them make a book or a brochure. It's strictly up to them what they want to do to present their presentation. But it has to be a presentation and they have to present it to the class. Our objectives will be that students will present their unit projects with their partners to demonstrate their learning over the early river civilizations. And students will be able to use technology and other forms of sources to gather information and create presentations to demonstrate knowledge of a subject. So for my checklist, I have a checklist for the group information. And groups have to submit a group plan that states the jobs and responsibilities of each group member. This is probably going to be submitted week 1. That's my plan. And then it'll be reviewed by me and then passed back out with feedback if necessary. They also need to provide a list of sources where information was found, what type of presentation they plan on doing. That also needs to be approved by me prior to them working on it, which will probably be week 1. And group participation submitted prior to the presentation detailing who did what. In my head, it's just going to be a sheet of paper where it has student A and then they're part of the project. It's going to be submitted to me right before they go into their presentation. They also have information, and these are going to be what needs to be in the presentation, but it's not limited. It's just really a guideline. They need to have the physical features of the land, the location of the civilization, the time frame in which it thrived, the daily lives of these people, women, children, men, slaves, all of that needs to be included. What type of food, home, and clothing could be typically seen in this civilization, what languages were used, written and oral, the social hierarchy, like if there was like in ancient Egypt, for instance, they have pharaohs and then it goes down. Ancient China has emperors, so forth. The government and law, education, values and beliefs, including religion, inventions and technological advancements. They also are asked to include something that they found that they thought was interesting pertaining to the civilization. And I've asked that they include a map just to illustrate, to reiterate where we're at in the world and to provide an example for students as the presentation goes on. And they are to list 5 other illustrations or pictures just to help students learn. I think that'll be particularly good for visual learners. And then lastly, we have the performance task rubric. Same standards and objectives as the performance task. So we have an A student wheel, a B student wheel, a C student, and a D student. I need to correct that. I think that's going to bother me. Sorry. Students will be graded on group participation, the planning, gathering information, and presenting. That's 10 points. They will be graded on the quality of information and explanation of material, 20 points. The organization and overall quality of the presentation is 10 points. And then also the eyes, body, and voice for presentation, which will be 10 points. And an A student will have a part in the project clearly addressed in the plan. They will be present for grading on other group projects, and their part in their presentation will be easily recognized. B students, you can somewhat recognize everything. C students are very limited, or they're lost in the presentation. They don't show up for other people's presentations. And a D student basically has no part and wasn't present, just decided not to do the assignment. For the quality of information, a student will use a variety of resources to gather information, provide sources of information, and have information that is relevant to the presentation. B students use some of the resources and provide some sources of information, and their information is somewhat relevant. C students have very few sources of information, and most of their information is irrelevant to the presentation. And D students